let's go with Mike. I said Mike, so let's do Mike. Okay, Mike, you had a question for me and Kelley. Go ahead, ask your question. I will let Kelley answer first.
I listened to a number of Atheist Experience and the Line. And by the way, what is the difference between the Atheist Experience and the Line as far as your shows?
There are two different organizations. For one, we're a nonprofit. They're a for-profit.
That's not the topic of the question, yeah. Mike. Can you focus on the topic of the question
sorry,
like? Let's focus.
Yeah. Sure. Well, the reason the reason why I brought it up is, and I've heard it on the Atheist Experience as well. I listen to both. When
can you ask your questions? Like, can you ask your question? Ask your question. Yeah.
Sure. You want me to ask the question?
Okay.
Yes.
Ask the question, please ask the question. Yes, thank you. That would be great.
Okay. My question is, how do you determine whether something's true or not? Do you follow the rules of debate, or do you look for evidence, or both? I think it's confusing when people debate atheists. All of a sudden they say, well, you got the burden of proof. And, it's like, well, this is evidence that would pile up. It gets a little legalistic. And I was curious how you two approach whether something is true or not.
Depends on... Oh, do you want to go first, Kelley?
Oh, no, I was going to ask you if you wanted to start, Armin. Please, you start.
Okay,
please.
So I try to put things in two categories, whether we're in the territory of rationalism or empiricism, right? So usually when we're in empiricism, usually the results that come with that, like the conclusion that comes from the empiricism is more reliable, more trustworthy. You could hold these views with more certainty, even though not absolute certainty. And then in rationalism is something that is less reliable, but more accessible because we don't have empirical data for a lot of things, right? So when it comes to empirical claims, based on what we have seen, based on the results, the modern scientific method seems to be the most reliable methods of figuring out whether empirical claims are true or not. And we could go and look at the criteria and the methodology of what the modern scientific method is, and what the modern scientific method considers as evidence. How does it test things? What are its metrics for accepting a theory or not accepting a theory as probable or not probable. When it comes to rationalism, because in our daily lives we don't have data for everything. We have to, the second best tool that we have in our toolkit is rationalism, even though it's not as good as the empirical scientific method, because there's so many things that we have to come with a conclusion with. We go with rationalism, and when it comes to this category, the critical thinking skills, knowing fallacies, understanding what's a fallacious argument and what is not a fallacious argument. There are around, if you know 10 to 20 logical fallacies and try to practice them in debates and try to recognize fallacious arguments in other people's arguments, and more importantly, if you could catch yourself or let other people catch you making logical fallacies, that's, I think, the best way. That has been proven to be the best way of figuring out which arguments are the most rational or not. So which one of these two categories are you talking about? Because overall, the tools to finding the truth that people have offered is empiricism, rationalism, faith, and gut revelations, and gut feelings. So those last three seem to suck based on their performance, based on the results that we've seen. The two first one that I mentioned, empiricism and rationalism, seem to be performing better, with empiricism being the best one with a huge margin.
Yeah, I mean, if you have current evidence, empiricism, that sounds like the way to go. I like you call it rationalism with the logical fallacies. I found that very interesting to catch other people and myself doing that. I like that a lot. What do you do about historical evidence, like George Washington? How would you prove him?
So, because I myself, I'm not an expert into going out and finding historical evidence, I use Occam's razor and come up with go appeal to experts. So remember, appealing to experts is not a fallacy. It's appeal to false experts that is a fallacy, right? So given I could come using Occam's razor, I would argue that it's very unlikely for something that most historians that spend their time and their career into finding and investigating, if many historians on something are in agreement on something, using Occam's razor, I will come up with the conclusion that they're probably right. If they're in disagreement on something, I will be, well, then I don't know. I have no business in claiming that which position is the most likely. But if with the historical claim, if the expert in the field are aligned, then using Occam's razor, I will come up with the conclusion that that's probably the most justified position to have, even if it's untrue. Like, I'm not going to be married to it. I'm just saying it's justified for me to have this position for now, unless there's the evidence comes and contradicts it, and the experts in the field change their opinions about it. So there's a difference between truth and what is justified for us to believe in at the moment. So sometimes maybe the position that is justified for you to hold, because, actually I should say, when you ask about the truth, we could actually never get to the truth. What we can get is a way for us to reliably say that this is more likely closer to the truth, right? Not 100%. So that's the best we can do. We could never get to the truth itself, but we could say that this is likely closer to the truth, but it could also be farther from the truth. But given that the methodology that we use are methods that have been shown to be likely the most effective ones, I could reliably say that the conclusion is a justified position for me to have. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I agree. You guys are different from each one of them. Well, you're all different people, but that is not what went down as far as I was listening to, the Matthew or whoever the older guy is that runs these things, I guess, or some of them. Kelley, I'm curious what your opinion is. And
what if I want to believe in something?
It was.
If I want to believe in 100% in something, I need unambiguous empirical proof of that thing. Otherwise, I'm in a position just like Armin was saying. Do I think this is most likely true? Yes, but I'm not going to commit 100% to it unless I have that unambiguous empirical evidence. Otherwise, I can't know for sure, 100% for sure. So that's what I look for to find truth. Otherwise, I can say this is most likely true, but I don't know 100% for fact. Like, I couldn't tell you 100% for fact that George Washington existed. I do believe that he probably and most likely did because of all the evidence that we have from his time period. We have written letters from him. We have eyewitness accounts of him. We have correspondence between him and other people. We have an estate that he lived at and ran. So there's all this evidence. But I wasn't there. I didn't meet George Washington, so I can't say 100%. But I would say I'm 98% sure he existed. So does that help? Does that explain my position?
Yeah, for what it's worth, I agree with both of you guys 100%, not 98%. How's that?
Yeah, okay.
Here's all right. Now, George Washington doesn't matter as much as somebody who affects your life. So, but you look at George Washington and it's like, man, I'm not certain. I was listening to an argument with it was like a child. He was like, I don't know, young teenager. And they're just like, no, we're not going to accept anything as far as Jesus, from Tacticus, I can't pronounce him, and some of the other people that were close to his era. They were just throwing it all out and like, nope. And I was like, wow. I mean, I thought everybody understood that Jesus did exist and that he did do certain things in the tomb.
Jesus' existence is not the main.
I was like, wow.
No, so Jesus' existence is not the main issue. Okay, whether he was the main. I think the important part is. So basically, I'm not sure about this, but when I look at most biblical scholars, they seem to believe, most of them, that this Jesus character was based on a historical figure, somebody. Okay, there are some people who disagree with that, and but it seems like most biblical scholars, both secular and Christian, they do agree that there was somebody there that did something, right? But that's not as important when it comes to claims on Christianity. What matters is, where's the evidence for miracles or being God or the Son of God or any of that? Okay, that's the main point, because there's no historical evidence for any of that. Even if you could claim there's historical evidence that there was one guy that did something, that was crucified for some reason, none of the things Jesus said or none of the miracles that he has claimed to have done, there's no. Do you agree that there's no historical evidence for any of that?
I think for some of the things he did, like Pontius Pilate, they found his little tomb box, if you will, back in the 90s, and they got some other things that refer to Jesus being there at that time, who was in charge and whatnot. So there's some historical
the miracles,
evidence.
Miracles, not him existing. Yeah. So.
Yeah, I'm not sure what evidence you're talking about.
There's no way to get that wine. Yeah, they can't find the wine that he turned water into wine. Prove it, can't. He killed these people. They're all dead.
I wanted to go back to you explaining this a little bit better. So they found Pilate's ossuary, you're saying, and then something on that ossuary proved Jesus. Is that what you were claiming?
They found that it said, and I apologize for not having it in front of me, but yeah, they found basically they threw his bones in a little box.
It's called an ossuary.
And yeah. So are you aware of that?
I seem to remember that. I seem to remember that was not the case, but it doesn't matter. Let's say it was, okay? Let's say it was. That's what I'm saying, is that we have no historical evidence for the most important part of the story. Okay, let's say me and Kelley and you agree that there was a guy that came and said some things, and some people didn't like it, and he was crucified. Okay, let's say that happened. Okay, Okay, fine.
Okay,
what does that got to do with Christianity? Jesus being the Son of God, Jesus being God Himself, Jesus doing miracles. Let's say we have absolute evidence, undeniable evidence, that there was a guy at that time that said some things. Some people around that place didn't like it, and they asked the Romans to kill this guy, and the Romans said sure, and they crucified him. End of story. The most important parts of the story is missing. The evidence for the most important parts of the story that turns Christianity true. Is there any evidence for any of that?
Well, that's where the burden of proof and trying to approach from a debate point of view gets sketchy, or I think it gets away from the truth. You can only prove that Jesus rose, or you can add evidence. You can't prove anything, but you can add evidence. Like if his body was there, it's like, look, he's dead. There's the body. And if it's not there, then you've got nothing. It's like, well,
so we're not trying to prove anything.
Something happened.
So Mike, let's just categorize things. Let's be organized about our thoughts here, okay? So I'm going to be a little bit picky about the language that we use here, okay? So when we're talking about proving, we're mostly talking about math or deductive reasoning, or programming or something like that. So we're trying to, because proof assumes that we could get to certainty. Instead of proving something, let's just try to find enough evidence, not to prove something that is true, just find enough evidence to justify believing in something, right? So I'm not even going to claim that Jesus did not do any miracles or he's not God. Let's say he is God and he did miracles. You agreed earlier, you said you agree with me and Kelley earlier. If we don't find any evidence for it, even if it happened, we're not justified in believing in it, right? Even if it did happen, okay? So forget proving.
Right.
Proving is for math and some other parts of deductive reasoning. Let's see if we could find enough evidence to justify us believing that those miracles happened. Do we have such evidence? Yes or no?
We have. I think we have last man standing evidence, and by people's reaction evidence.
Okay, so you're saying because a lot of people said, so I'm not sure if you're saying this. When you're saying reaction, okay, actually I'm not gonna assume what you're saying. Explain that to me. I stopped myself from assuming what you're gonna say. So go ahead. Explain what that means.
Yeah. Yeah. First of all, 100% with we can't prove anything. We're just looking at evidence. Where's the evidence go?
Okay,
Does it pile up? Is it meaningful? So all in on that. But as far as the evidence goes, the Romans were very efficient at killing people. They knew what they were doing, and this Jesus was a problem. And they're like, make it go away, put it in there, and they put a guard on there because they suspected somebody might try and steal his body and say all this stuff.
Okay, so, Mike, these are okay. So wait. You're referring to the stories. Okay, so first of all, everything you're saying, we have no idea if any of this happened. Okay, this is not something, because you said we're looking at evidence. So the stories that is mentioned, because if you're telling me that they put a guard on there and this happened, that happened, your source is right now the Bible. So if you're using the Bible as a source of what happened, well, the same source says the miracle has happened. So if I'm going to believe that the guard was there at this time and this happened, then why I should believe the rest of the story as well, with the miracles, you know? So I don't think like what the Bible says is considered evidence, because that's just the story that people wrote on a piece of paper a couple of years after this whole event supposedly happened. So, you know, evidence. This is not considered evidence when it comes to historical standards. But go on.
Well, what you mean is it's not strong evidence. I mean, it is evidence. The question is, can you corroborate it with anything else? And there are other non-biblical documents. Like I was talking about, Pontius Pilate was indeed in charge at that time. This Tacitus gentleman did refer to a Jesus Christ being crucified. So there's other non-biblical historical.
No. We have already assumed.
I just want to point out a historical fact here. Tacitus wasn't even born until 25 years after Jesus was crucified.
I don't want to get into.
Born.
I'm just gonna.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, no. Okay, I don't want to get into that, Mike. I don't want to I want to assume. Okay, so when it comes to supernatural stuff, things that could naturally have happened, let's just assume that you're right. I just want to see what evidence can we get for the supernatural stuff. Okay. So when you say like, oh, we have evidence that, I don't know, the Romans did this or that, this is all within the natural realm. Okay. Tell me how you get from all of that. I'm not going to even argue over like, oh, actually, this is not exactly how it happened. This is what happened. Tell me from all the stuff that we can see, all the things that you claim that we have historical evidence for that actually happened, how do we get from that to anything supernatural? Get me there step by step, but can you try to get to the point fast if you can? No pressure.
Yeah, I don't know that you can get to the supernatural unless you were one of the eyewitnesses that saw it happen. They said there's like 500 people that saw Jesus, raised from the dead, his disciples. I'm sure there were others. But unless you're one of those people, then there's no way. You just have to go based on their reactions, which were they changed their lives and they would not recant. They got killed.
How do we know that?
The reaction of the disciples, they wouldn't recant.
Okay, but let's assume that. Okay, Kelley, how about we give him that? How about we give him that happened? Okay, because Kelley, I think Kelley is trying to make the point that we have people claiming that they witnessed something. We have one person that claimed that 500 people saw something. That's just a claim. That's not historical. But let's say that you're saying that we have some people who didn't recant. Okay, they said that they said something. They believe in it, and that means that that's your evidence for those miracles happening. Is that your evidence? Because actually what we do have evidence for, which I think Mike is right, and Kelley, maybe you agree with this as well, is that when a lot of these people who said that they saw these things, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, when the Romans were torturing them, some of them didn't take it back. They were like, no, this is what we saw. This is what we believe in. Okay, sure. Let's say under torture, they didn't take it back. Do you consider that to be evidence, Mike, for those miracles happening?
Compelling. I would say, yeah. I mean, most people won't die over a lie. It's like if Jesus didn't raise or do anything supernatural, they're going to be like, stop. I was kidding. Stop ripping my leg off. They think possibly all of the disciples were tortured to death.
What if they were not lying? What if they, Mike? What if they, Mike? What if they're not lying? What if they actually believe in something that is not true, but they actually believe it, and they believe in it genuinely, and they have faith in it, and they're dying for something that they think is the truth, even though it's not? Remember, the people that the Romans were torturing are not the same people who are not. They're not these are not the eyewitnesses. Okay, the so-called eyewitnesses, right? They were the tortures that you're talking about is coming a couple of years after this cult became more widespread, after the claims that 500 people or whatever people were eyewitnesses. These are the people that came after. So the religion grew, and when the religion grew, these people who were being tortured, they were not the eyewitnesses, they were just the believers. But anyways, do you not agree that people could be genuinely believing something and be willing to die for it, even though it's nonsense? I mean, I'm an ex-Muslim. You're a Christian, I'm assuming, Mike, right? I see many Muslims willing to die for their religion. Does that make their religion true?
No, it just adds evidence, and you got my attention. If somebody's willing to die for something, it's like, well, that's interesting, and I have checked into the Muslim faith. I didn't find it satisfying.
Okay, it's interesting. I agree with you. If people are willing to die for their religion, that makes their religion interesting. And I will accept that Christianity is interesting. Yes, we have evidence that Christianity is interesting that could make people die for it. But that's the evidence we got to the point that we agree that we have evidence for Christianity being able to do interesting things. It's no evidence for it being true. Sorry, Kelley, do you want to add something?
We can prove it's true.
I was just going to point out that people have died for a lot of bad ideas throughout history. Again, it's almost like you say these things, and we actually have historical evidence of the things that you're saying being kind of normal, or like people die for things that are wrong all the time. Look at all the people who died in World War II for a wrong ideology. Everybody who died to preserve monarchy in World War I. People have died for a lot of bad reasons because they believed in them. Didn't mean they were right. Didn't mean that what they were dying for was true. But people have died for a lot of bad and wrong things. That's the only thing I wanted to point out.
Yeah, and Kelley, actually, now that you say that, people have died for the sake of being able to kill Christians.
Yeah.
People have sacrificed their lives for the chance at being able to kill Christians.
True. Very true.
And also, Mike, have you heard ever a professional historian coming and saying that, I have evidence for something to be historical because there were some people that were so believed in it so much that they were dying for the sake of it? Like, have you ever seen that being an argument for the historicity of something by professional historians?
Yeah, actually it is. I mean, if people are willing to die for it, you should take a look at it and see if there's any other evidence.
That's your standard, because
other Romans.
Throughout history, people have been dying for contradictory ideas. How is that? I think you're moving the goalposts, because you keep saying, I'm saying, is this evidence for this being true? And you're saying, we should take a look at it. Of course, we should be taking a look at this. We should be taking a look at this, even if people are not dying for it. It's a historical thing. It's a major religion. Even if it was a small cult, we should be looking at it. Like, it makes it interesting. Are we looking for evidence for something being interesting or worth looking at, or are you? Because you notice how you change the standard. I'm asking you if you have evidence for something being true. You're saying that I have evidence for this being interesting because, look, people are dying for it, so that's interesting. We should take a look at it. But that's not what we were looking for. at the beginning, I was asking you if you have evidence for this being true, the miracles being true, not if you have evidence for something to be worthy of looking at. I will give you that. Is Christianity worth studying, worth looking at it? Even without that, I would consider it worth looking at and worth studying. Islam, even small little cults are worth looking at and studying. So do you have evidence for the miracles being true?
Well, to answer your question, people willing to die for something, I think it adds evidence to it, and it is interesting. It does both. And then you got to look at, because it's interesting, you look into what did Jesus say, and everybody else is like Muslims are like, oh, you get 72 virgins, you got Mormons, you get your own planet, that sounds nice. Jesus is like, forgive your enemies. Like, well, what? You know, he's totally different. And he's like, I'm the only one that's going to help you.
Wait a minute. You don't just, that's not all you get. That's not all you get.
I mean,
you get
totally
eternity in heaven too. You left that out. You get, you do get rewarded in Christianity too. You get eternity in heaven. That's just like the Mormons' planet or the 72 virgins. I don't know why you like kind of ignored that, because that is like a major point of Christianity, isn't it? That you get to live in heaven in paradise for eternity. And then you're saying that there's not a reason to do it for a personal reason for yourself. There totally is. There is a reward.
If you don't like God, heaven is awful, because then you got this guy who you hate and you're around him forever.
Then why would you be a Christian?
Like God.
If you hated God, then why would you be a Christian? I don't. It was like my point went right over your head there. I'm not sure you understand.
That's what a non-Christian is.
Okay, so
yeah, if you hate God and you love your own
can we get back to the historicity of the miracles, because is that okay?
Yeah.
I just want to I just want Mike to you understand what just happened. Okay, you started the call by asking us, how do we know something is true? Okay, so I think the better way to ask that is, how do we know something is more likely true, right? And one way that I pick the tools that I told you, like when I said empiricism and rationalism, mostly empiricism, is not just because we believe it for the sake of, like, why do we believe in the modern scientific method? Is that just something that we dogmatically believe in? Is that something that we just repeat it because it just sounds good? No, because it has a record of giving us results that have explanatory power, that have predictive power, that they are non-contradictory, and many other metrics. Okay, but so that's how you decide if your methodology in getting closer to the truth works or not. So let's apply that to your methodology and what you consider to be evidence. You're saying that if certain people believe something strong enough to be willing to die for it, that is evidence towards that what they're claiming to be true. That methodology gives you random answers that are contradictory to each other. So if I use your standard to figure out what is true, then Hindus would have evidence for their claim, Muslims would have evidence for their claim, Christians would have evidence for their claim, Jews would have evidence for their claim, a lot of tiny little cults would have, Nazis would have evidence for their claims. A lot of these people will have evidence for their claims. And because, so I look at your methodology, because it gives me a lot of random conclusions that don't have explanatory power, they don't have predictive power, and more importantly, they seem to be self-contradictory, I will basically consider your methodology as not a reliable way to get to closer to the truth. Does that make sense?
Can I answer that? Yeah.
Please.
Yes, go ahead.
No. And you got to let me finish. Give me 10 seconds here, but that is evidence.
Okay.
It's not complete evidence at all, but it's some evidence that it might be true. We're trying to get towards the truth. If someone's willing to die for something, that is some evidence. And it might be, if you're talking
what is it evidence
all sorts of other religions, that is some evidence. Now, what
is it evidence of? How does it prove anything,
Yeah.
Mike, sorry, I don't want to cut you off again, but this is like the third time you said this, and we have refuted it. It is not evidence of the truth of Christianity. It's just all it's evidence of is that people were willing to die for Christianity, but it has nothing to do with the truth of Christianity itself. And we keep trying to explain this to you, that people have been willing to die for all kinds of wrong things. 500,000 people died to preserve slavery in the Civil War in the United States. Was that true? No. The fact that they died, yes. But was slavery true and good? No. That's what I'm trying to explain to you. Armin and I have been trying to explain to you that just because somebody's willing to die for a cause does not make that cause true or good. And it doesn't seem like you're understanding us when we keep explaining the same thing over and over and over to you, because you keep saying, well, people died for it, so that's good evidence. Well, that, you know what? It might be evidence, but it's really, really bad evidence. And honestly, I don't really care about evidence. What I care about is proof. And that is not proof of anything that you're trying to prove. Sorry, but it just isn't.
So, Mike, when you say this is evidence that shows that it might be true, okay? So, first of all, we were already in the might be true. Might be true is already true. Is already true for everything. Okay, there is nothing that doesn't apply to, but like. My giant farting turtle, I don't know if you watch the show, is an example of that. Or Russell's teapot, or Carl Sagan's dragon in the garage. Okay, so might be true. You don't even need to provide evidence for that. When it comes to might be true, that applies to almost everything, right? So that's not something to brag about. If you find evidence that makes that shows something might be true, you haven't accomplished anything, right? I need evidence that makes something more than might be true. Okay, more than if Santa Claus might be true. Okay, werewolves might be true. Okay, so when you say this, I have evidence that increases the likelihood of this being true. I question that, because I showed you. We have actually a lot of evidence that shows humans are so quick to be very passionate about their beliefs and be willing to do. This is part of our tribal human evolution that made us survive as part of tribes. We come up with symbols. We try to signal to the other members of the tribe that we are dedicated to this tribe so much that whatever the tribe has chosen as a symbol to dedicate itself to, I am willing to pay a heavy price to show my dedication to this tribe by paying a huge cost for it, right? It's a human desire. This is how I show my position in this tribe as a valuable member of this tribe, by paying the highest cost for my membership. This is something that we see historically everywhere as part of the. It seems like our brain has been wired to want to show that I am willing to pay a higher price, and that makes me a more valuable member of this tribe. So, given that it's so common, given that it's everywhere, given that we have explanation for why humans behave this way, given that the conclusions that come out of this, given that people are willing to pay a heavy price for views that are self-contradictory, it doesn't seem to even slightly increase the chance of it being true. I mean, and even if it did, it would increase it by an epsilon, not, because for me to consider something justified to believe in, you have to bring me at least above 50%. If the chance of something was, I don't know, close to zero, like slightly above 0%, and you managed to bring it slightly higher than that, like let's say it was 1/10 of 1%, and now is 2/10 of 1%, you're still so far away from 50% that it's not worth me considering as a justified true belief yet. Does that make sense?
Can I answer that? Yeah.
Go ahead.
Just because something is, I first of all, I disagree that it's some common thing. I don't want to talk about it necessarily, but that it's common that people are willing to die all the time to get into the group or whatever.
I didn't say die. I didn't say die. I said pay a heavy price. I said pay a heavy price.
Well, that's not the same as dying, because we're talking about dying. That's two different things. So
it's a
dying is the ultimate
subcategory
price.
of it.
So we're talking dying.
Yes.
That narrows the field down. And if the early Christians weren't willing to die, well, that would kind of knock them out of competition right away for being truthful. It's a basic requirement. If this is really true, you should be willing. Early Christians with Romans putting a sword to them, they should be willing to die. If they weren't, then it's like maybe Jesus wasn't what he said he was. Maybe they're making it up.
Okay, Mike, let me agree with you something. Mike, I would agree with you something. It's good evidence that they believed that they were right. It's really good evidence that they believed that they were right. It's not good evidence that they were right. Okay, for example, kamikaze pilots for Japan, right? Right? They sacrificed their planes, right, to kill themselves for the sake of imperialist Japan. The fact that they did that, to me, is good evidence that those pilots sacrificed their life for something that they believed that was true. That doesn't mean that the emperor was God or that their bizarre ideology was true. It just shows me that the Japanese pilots, good evidence, likely believed that they were dying for a worthy cause. It doesn't show that their ideology was right, and it doesn't show that they were dying for a worthy cause, but it shows that they believed it.
Yep, I agree with that. And just because people are willing to die for it, great example, the Japanese fleet. They thought their emperor was God, or he said he was, and they did die. I agree. But if you're not willing to die for it, that's kind of a minimum requirement for commitment. And then the next thing would be a lot of other people's lives were changed. You could say, well, that happened in other religions too.
Mike, do you believe the world is flat or some close to sphere shape?
The evidence that I've seen shows that it's round.
Okay.
I think it's
how many people have died for that? How many people have died for the sake of making the point that the Earth is sphere-like close to sphere? Again, I'm saying close to sphere so that the people in the chat don't like, it's not exact. Yeah. Okay. So
say zero.
Maybe zero, I think close to zero. I'm not sure if there's any, but it's places. Do you think? Let's say if it comes out that it's zero, are you going to be like, well, I'm not going to take this claim seriously because it shows a lack of commitment?
It's going to factor in. Yes, it will. Yes.
It factors in.
It's going to factor into everybody.
Do you have weird, Mike? Do you have weird standards?
Dude, yeah, you have a completely different way of coming to the truth than I do. Completely different. And I'm not sure.
How would you do it?
Go ahead, Armin. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Kelley. Sorry.
I'm about to say, you've been doing awesome without me. So go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I forgot what I was going to say now, honestly.
Oh, sorry. I interrupted.
No, that's fine. That's fine. But it.
I just said you have my attention.
We were talking about the
guy for something. You got my attention.
And we were talking about the different ways we arrive at truth. And I'm wondering how you figure out what, you asked us how we did it. Now I'm wondering how you come to the truth, because it seems like you're coming to what you think are truths that I would never, ever accept as a truth. So I'm wondering what your path to truth is.
Oh, well, I mean, it seemed like it was a big point in history. We named our calendar, we're in the year 2024.
That's not what I asked you. I asked you how you arrive at what is true, Mike. That was what you called to ask us, right?
Armin did it way better than I could, but yeah, I try to look at evidence and scientific method if you can, and then historical evidence gets really tricky because now you're up to experts. So I like to read what the experts say and see if it matches with just good reasoning. And then life experience too. Does that bring through?
Now let me ask you another question, Mike. If you have evidence of something, do you just accept that evidence, or do you put that evidence through a process, to find out whether or not that evidence actually proves the thing that the evidence was presented to prove, or do you just accept the evidence on its own?
I guess like a good journalist, I'm not a journalist, but I try to get multiple sources and contradictory sources, people that want to say it's true and people that say it's not true. I like to read both sides and investigate it that way. That reveals a lot.
That didn't really answer my question. What I guess I'm asking you is, do you take evidence as it is, or do you try to take that evidence to prove that evidence, that evidence actually coincides with the claim, right? How do, or like you're using this, like you're using this evidence of people willing to die for it. That, like we both said, that doesn't prove anything. So then because that doesn't prove your point, we can take that evidence and we can toss it aside. It's no longer good evidence. And this is what I'm wondering. It's like
true.
Yeah, no, it's totally true, because it doesn't prove your point. It does not prove your point. So it is not good evidence, and you can toss it out because it is not proof of the claim. It's not. It's just a thing.
It's a partial.
No, it doesn't prove it. Doesn't prove it in any way, shape, or form. And we have shown you that by giving you dozens of examples of other things that people were willing to die for that were not really true. So I don't, and we have done that. We've given you like a dozen examples, and you still cling to this as good evidence. It's not. It's really, really bad evidence because it doesn't prove your claim in any way, shape, or form. It doesn't even give us a reasonable doubt that the claim is true, because that evidence can be used for so many things that are false as well.
Well, it's a minimum requirement for big ideas. It is, if people are willing to die for it. Whether you agree with that or not, that's true.
So, Mike, we're going on this is a bit circular. I just want to say that just remember that you changed what you were fighting for in the middle of the conversation, right? So when you say, all I'm saying that you have my attention, okay? I'm going to agree with you. Any ideology that has people that are willing to die for that idea, if you say, then, okay, that gets my attention, it gets my attention as well. But that was not the question. The question is like, is this a good standard? If your question is this a good standard for what they're claiming is true? It's a horrible standard. If your question is this a good standard for things worthy of us paying attention to? I completely agree. If people are dying for their ideas, it's worth paying attention to. But these are two different things.
Yeah.
Okay. It's a very bad standard for whether or not they're what they're believing is true. But it's a very good standard for us discovering if this is worth paying attention to. Of course, it's worth paying attention to. People are dying. People's lives are being taken. So of course, it's worth paying attention to. But that was not the original question. Anyways.
I agree with that. And then, somebody willing to die for it, it's not proof. That'd be 100%. I'd say it's 10%, but then you got to award that to Muslims and whoever else as well. But then they stop at 10%. But yeah, that's where I'm at. But
historically, we have seen more crappy ideas where people are just dying left and right for. Okay. And many good ideas that people are not dying for, right? So I think you thinking that this gives you 10%. I think the record shows otherwise. The record shows that when people are dying in masses for an idea, it ended up like being wacko beliefs. But go on, Kelley.
I was just wanted to ask Mike. Mike, if you had to cross a rope bridge, and you were seriously only 10% sure that bridge was going to hold up, would you still cross it?
No.
Okay, then. Why are you using 10% of something to think that something is true? Why would you base a positive decision on this 10% and a negative decision on that other 10%?
For the simple reason that the difference between these people dying is they got killed by somebody, whereas you're talking about Nazis who are killing other people. They got killed.
I didn't mention Nazis at all. I asked you about a rope bridge, about you crossing a rope bridge. I didn't mention Nazis at all just now. You said you would not cross that bridge if you were only 10. You said you would not cross it if we were only 10% sure it would not hold up. So you made a negative decision in that case. But then you said there's a 10% chance because people believed in this that it's true. So you made a positive decision in that case, again, on just 10%. So why would you make a negative decision in one case and a positive decision in the other case on just a 10% surety? What's the difference here? Why?
In both cases, 10% isn't enough. It has to be more for Christianity. It has to be more for the rope bridge.
That's exactly what I'm saying, and yet you're still saying that you yourself said that it was 10% evidence that people believed in something. If people believed in something and willing to die for it, that was about 10% evidence that it was true. And then you just told me that wasn't enough to believe in it, and yet you're still arguing that it's true off of that evidence.
Mike, we have to move on, but let me just say one point, and then you could finish with one point. And then, Mike, this has been a very interesting conversation, and I hope because it's fun talking to you, even if we disagree, okay? But I want you to also think about
like talking to you guys
questioning the wisdom of. Yeah, thank you. I want you think this. If this is the strongest evidence Christianity has to offer, okay, for it being true, think about the wisdom of a God that wants you to rely on this. This is what I have to work with. I have to, because this. I'm not seeing you providing us. This is I'm assuming that this is the strongest evidence. That's why you're talking about it, or unless you have other evidence for Jesus being God. But think about, even if what you're saying is true, think about a God that wants you to rely on this, because even if it gives you 10%, then honestly, I don't think he gives you even epsilon, let alone 1%. But even if it gives you 10%, you're so far away from 50% that still makes this unjustifiable belief. A belief that is not justified to have, right? And think about a God that wants you, wants you to believe in him, and he's giving you the tools that he's giving you, the evidence that he's offering you is something that gets you only this far, that other people also have. Like, even if what you're saying is true, it's so bizarre. Like, you should be questioning the wisdom of a God that the expectation that he has from you is to completely believe in him 100%, and this is what I have to work with. But anyways, Mike, do you want to say something, and then we go to the next caller, and then call back in, because it's good to have you on.
Yeah. Hey, thank you. I was real quick. I didn't start out believing in Jesus because of the resurrection. I started out because of science, and I'd like to talk about that another time. And then I was stuck with which religion is right, and then I ended up with Jesus. That's how I went, just so you know.
Cool. Let's talk about that next time you call, because it's good to talk.
All right. Thank you, gentlemen. Take care.
Okay.